Minister in the Prime Minister's Department of Malaysia to make the presentation. Excellency, have the floor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Mr. President, ministers and distinguished delegates, before I begin, I would like to invite everyone to watch a 3.5-minute video on Malaysia's progress on the SDG initiatives. Thank you. If we can have the video on.
Dulu dan sekarang lagi bagus sekarang. Bekalan air bersih dan bekalan elektrik dan ekonomi.
I'm so proud to see nowadays there are so many successful corporate leaders and homemakers, of course, and also all women, very successful. This brings out such an overwhelming feeling, me being a woman myself.
Can still do a lot of things. I'm very thankful that we have a place like this where everyone can exercise and improve their health.
I do a lot of work on mapping the coral reefs around Malaysia and also to look at the reef health status around our waters in Malaysia. Once it is established as a marine park area, it will be easier to manage for people to use it in a sustainable way.
Malaysia is now about to embark on its next 5-year development plan, the 11th Malaysia Plan from 2016 to 2020. In many aspects, the plan mirrors the multidimensional nature of the SDG, with the people at the center of all development efforts.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We all made this journey for a reason. For Malaysia, it has been a humbling one. Despite the many challenges we faced, we have remained true to our goal of making sustainability the crux of our development. It is indeed a great honor to be in this august house, to share experience, to review ourselves and reinvigorate our mutual goals insofar as sustainable development is concerned. After all, what is sustainable development if it holds no relevance to what the future holds for our children? It has to be a consensus, ad item. It has to run parallel to the aspiration of the future generation. Thus, Malaysia, as a proud participant of the 2030 Agenda, Sustainable Development Goals, would like to share with you our experience in sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about development, it is vital for us to look three ways. To look back, reminding ourselves of our past. To look at the present, assessing how much we have achieved. And to look forward, setting a path for a future that is sustainable for generations to come. Malaysia embarked on this journey of sustainable development in the early 1970s, when the Malaysian government introduced the new economic policy. It was a time when almost half the population of Malaysia, 49.3%, was living in poverty, and income inequality was grave, with the Gini coefficient hovering at around 0.513. Moreover, due to the severe income gap between different ethnic groups of Malaysia, it was a time when we were just recovering from a dark episode of our nation's history that ended with the sectarian strife in 1969. There was little optimism then regarding the prospect of Malaysia, both within the country and from all around the world. Today, Malaysia is one of the most vibrant economies in the Asian region, with a strong GDP growth of 5.6% in the first quarter of 2017. This achievement was even prompted the World Bank to revise the Malaysian 2017 GDP growth forecast from 4.3% to 4.9%. Ladies and gentlemen, our strong economic growth is not the result of fortuitous coincidence. It took many years of hard work and planning. More recently, it began with the new economic model formulated by our Prime Minister, Datuk Seri Najib Razak. The new economic model is a testament to Malaysia's commitment to sustainable development. The sub-policies of NEM are derived from three fundamental pillars: high income, inclusivity, and sustainability. Now, not surprisingly, these pillars are in parallel with the three elements of the SDGs: economy, social, and in the environment. The latest development plan for Malaysia, called the 11th Malaysia Plan from 2016 to 2020, has its roots in the three pillars of NEM. The theme of 11th Malaysia Plan is anchoring growth on people. Here, the Malaysian people remain the centerpiece of all development efforts. We work hard to ensure that no section of our society is left behind in benefiting from and participating in the nation's economic growth. It was therefore not a surprise when our Prime Minister Najib Razak embraced the SDGs during his statement at the 2030 Agenda Sustainable Development Goals Summit here at the United Nations in New York in September 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, sustainable development has always been a common thread in our many five-year Malaysia plans. I am pleased to report that Malaysia has made progress in many facets of relating to SDGs. And however, in the interest of time, I will highlight our achievements with respect to 8 SDGs related to the 2017 theme of eradicating poverty and promoting prosperity in a changing world. Goal number 1, no poverty. Malaysia successfully reduced the number of households living under the poverty line index from 49.3% in 1970 to 0.6% in 2014. This is substantial in that it was declared the biggest reduction on the percentage of population below poverty line among ASEAN countries by the Asian Development Bank. We achieved this through strong emphasis on egalitarian access to education and skills development, robust income generation and employment creation, and universal access to basic needs such as electricity, clean water, transportation and housing, as well as social safety nets. Goal number 2, zero hunger. Malaysia has eradicated hunger and greatly reduced malnutrition through sustained efforts to supplement the dietary needs of children from poor families, as seen in the rehabilitation program for malnourished children. We have also raised our self-sufficiency levels in food production and are preparing for the impact of climate-related disasters to ensure food security. This has been made possible through the use of quality seeds, breeds and fries, a wider adoption of effective technologies among farmers, and in establishing new large-scale food production areas. Goal number 3, good health and well-being. Malaysia has made great strides in providing healthcare for the people since the 1970s. A universal system of public healthcare complemented by an active private healthcare system currently provides the full spectrum of health services from primary to tertiary care. Basic healthcare reaches even remote settlements through flying doctors services, and our focus now is in tackling second-tier health issues of non-communicable diseases, improving sexual and reproductive health, strengthening delivery of healthcare services to vulnerable groups such as the poor, the disabled, and the elderly, and in enhancing healthcare financing. Number 5, gender equality. Malaysia has achieved the 30% target of women in decision-making roles in the public sector. We are also striving to achieve the same target in the private sector, and among the initiatives to increase women's representation on boards of directors in the private sector include special training programs for women directors and the creation of registry of women directors who have been groomed for board roles in public listed companies. At a more primary level, I'm proud to say Malaysia's female labour participation rate has risen from 45.9% in 2010 to 54.1% in 2015. This is a respectable 7.3% increase that represents an additional 750,000 women at work and contributing to an estimated 0.3% GDP growth per annum. The National Policy on Women 1989 and the Plan of Action for the Advancement of Women 2010-2015 have contributed to further integrating women in development and elevating their status in society. Goal number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Malaysia's manufacturing sector is now transitioning to knowledge-intensive and high-value added activities. Investments in manufacturing and services sectors amounted to $300 billion between 2011 and 2015, and these two sectors contributed 77.2% of GDP and 78.2% of employment in 2016. On innovation, Malaysia was ranked 35th out of 228 countries in the Global Innovation Index 2016. To promote enterprise innovation, we have reinforced collaboration between industries, universities, and research institutions. And these include creating interactive platforms, providing demand-side financing, as well as streamlining the public sector research funding mechanism. We are also promoting social innovation by empowering communities in finding solutions to local problems. In terms of infrastructure, we have constructed 216,837 kilometers of roads linking rural and suburban communities to the cities in 2015. We have also invested heavily on seaports and airports to facilitate trade. Since Prime Minister Najib Razak took the helm in 2009, the rail network in Malaysia has given a boost with mega projects such as the East Coast Railway Link, or ECRL, linking the developing East Coast region to the highly developed capital region of Klang Valley. In Klang Valley, a more comprehensive intracity network is being built. In fact, Malaysia's first ever Mass Rapid Transit, or MRT, just began operation this Monday, July the 17th. In addition, MRT Line 2 is already in construction, with MRT Line 3 and Light Rail Transit, or LRT Line 3, in various planning stages. Not to forget Asia's most exciting international rail project, the Kuala Lumpur-Singapore high-speed rail, which will link the two most vibrant economies in Southeast Asia, is projected to be completed in the year 2026. Goal number 14, life below water. Malaysia has established 63 marine protected areas covering 16,492.92 square kilometers, accounting for 3.4% of the coastal and marine areas. Development in these protected areas is mandated by specific management protocols, taking into account conservation and rehabilitation of resources, as well as the provision of alternative livelihoods for local communities. The management The marine and coastal ecosystems are sustainably managed through the National Coastal Zone Physical Plan and the Coral Triangle Initiative Malaysia National Plan of Action. In the fisheries and aquaculture industry management, zoning regulations and fishing areas and good aquaculture practices through certification schemes are being implemented to ensure sustainability. Goal number 15, life on land. Malaysia has taken concrete steps to protect its biodiversity through the formulation and enforcement of the National Policy for Biological Diversity 2016-2025, National Forestry Policy 1978, and Wildlife Conservation Act 2010. As of 2015, 55.2% of Malaysia's total area was covered with forest under various forms of protection, in line with our pledge of maintaining at least 50% of land under forest cover at the Earth Summit 1992. Additionally, Malaysia is drawing up national red data list for threatened species such as tigers, elephants and tapirs. This is paired with implementing innovative methods that pool resources to combat poaching, illegal wildlife trade and encroachment into protected areas. The National Conservation Trust Fund has been established to fund initiatives related to conservation efforts. Goal number 17, partnerships for the goals. While Malaysia has benefited from technical assistance, grants and loans from multilateral agencies such as United Nations and World Bank, and development assistance from bilateral partners, it too has played an active role in sharing its development experience with other developing countries. Since the early 1980s, under the Malaysian Technical Cooperation Program, we have actively strengthened South-South cooperation and participated in all major South-South initiatives, including the Non-Aligned Movement, the Group of 77, the South Commission, and the G15. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the Agenda 2030 fortified our deep resolve to aggressively undertake sustainable development. This is self-evident as SDG principles are entrenched in every facet of Malaysia's development carried out under the 11th Malaysia Plan. We have taken 5 concrete steps to execute the 17 SDGs in a more systematic and measurable manner. First and foremost, we established a multi-stakeholder participatory governance structure spearheaded by the National SDG Council, chaired by the Prime Minister himself. This is followed by National SDG Symposium and forums to promote participation of stakeholders. And thirdly, Malaysia has conducted studies on data readiness and gap analysis. Malaysia has also undertaken the mapping exercise involving non-governmental civil society organizations and private sector to align SDGs with the 11th Malaysia Plan initiatives. And finally, we have formulated a national SDG roadmap to guide the implementation of Agenda 2030 and SDG. Allow me to end my statement by borrowing the wise words of the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and I quote, "We don't have a plan B because we don't have a planet B." End quote. Sustainable development goals are the least we can do to ensure a more sustainable future for our kids and generations to come. We must accomplish it, and we have to do it now. Thank you, fellow delegates. It has been a true honor and privilege to address you all. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your presentation. And now I open the floor for an interactive dialogue with the presenting country. Before I give the floor for the first speaker, I would once again remind delegation to kindly limit their intervention to 2 minutes each. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Thailand. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to first congratulate Your Excellency Abdul Rahman Dahlan, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department, and your team for the inspiring presentation and commend the commitments Malaysia has undertaken to implement the 2030 Agenda, particularly the building ownership of the SDGs. Your Excellency, one of the challenges which many countries encounter in the implementation of the SDGs concern the integrated, indivisible and interlinked nature of the global goals. Can you elaborate how Malaysia has addressed these interlinkages of the SDGs in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, as well as Malaysia's national SDG roadmap? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Thailand for your statement and question. Now I give the, the floor to the NGO Indigenous Group. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Atama Katama. I am a Dusun from Tambunan, Sabah. The Malaysian civil society organizations acknowledge the work undertaken over the many years by the government in addressing poverty and rising inequality from a multidimensional level. We note two areas of concern which the Vienna report has not given sufficient attention. Firstly, the lack of disaggregated data, including a total lack of any reference to the Bumiputra indigenous peoples living in poverty, especially among the Anak Negeri and Pemakai Menua, namely the natives of Sabah, Sarawak, and Orang Asli of Peninsular Malaysia, who are among the poorest of the poor in Malaysian society. Secondly, while Malaysia has been effective in addressing absolute poverty, the rising trend of inequalities and deprivation experienced by the bottom 40%, especially the urban poor living in high-rise flats, has not been given sufficient attention. Our question is, what commitment can Malaysia give pertaining to rectifying the lack of disaggregated data, free, prior and informed consent on development and land matters impacting indigenous peoples, poverty groups, including the bottom 40%, women, disabled peoples, displaced plantation workers, refugees, asylum seekers, sexual and gender minorities. In this context too, we also ask, how would the government address more effectively rising inequalities and exclusion of urban poor, including the informal sector through the SDGs, which seek not only to improve socio-economic conditions, but also their demographic rights for participation at the local levels to address these in a holistic manner. Adil Katalino, Bachiramin Kasuraga, Basangat Kajuwata. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indigenous People Major Group. Now, I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Children and Youth Major Group. You have the
Thank
floor.
you, Mr. President. We, the CSOs of Malaysia, acknowledge that the Economic Planning Unit of Malaysian government has engaged with the section of Malaysian NGOs in the VNR process. However, we would like to state that this engagement must not be just consultative for inputs, but it must be a genuine partnership in sustainable and just development. One aspect that we felt that is lacking in the voluntary national review of Malaysia is the pertinent systemic barrier, which is fundamentalism and extremism towards impunity towards selected non-state actors, shrinking of democratic inclusive spaces for dialogue, which ultimately disempowers the voices of marginalized communities such as women, persons with disabilities, refugees, asylum seekers, ethnic and religious minorities, sexual and gender minorities in Malaysia. Our question is, what guarantees can the government of Malaysia provide here to ensure that these trends are reversed in the future and that the space for meaningful engagement in achieving the 2030 Agenda implementation will be enhanced in line with the Universal Human Rights Principle and standards underlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Children and Youth Major Group, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of NGO Major Group. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a follow-up to the earlier two questions, I would like to ask the Honourable Minister to further clarify the multidimensional poverty, indicators moving beyond income, as well as strengthening the CSO partnership into a more meaningful expression to see its impact in terms of delivery and implementation, not just at the national, but also at the sub-regional and local levels. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegation of NGO Major Group for the question. And now I invite His Excellency Abdul Rahman Dahlan, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department of Malaysia, to briefly respond to comments and questions from the floor. Mr. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, thank you for the questions posed to Malaysia. I'd like to start with the answer to a representative of Thailand. Recognizing the complex interlinkages among the SDGs, and our first task was to undertake a detailed interlinkage mapping of the 17 SDGs. Then we went on to map the SDGs with our 5-year development plans. We have this 5-year development plan, and we are on the 11th version of the 5 Malaysia plan from 2016 to 2020. Based on the results of the mapping, we decided then to cluster the 17 SDGs into 5 clusters, while acknowledging the 3 that there needs to be a further coordination among the 5 clusters. And to facilitate implementation, we have formulated the SDG roadmap based on the 5 clusters. And the initiatives and outcomes under the 5 clusters were debated and agreed through the participation from all the stakeholders, ministries, agencies, NGOs, private sectors, and academia. And then this engagement process has increased greater commitment by the stakeholders. And to achieve the agreed outcomes, we are using the National Blue Ocean Strategy, which essentially breaks down silos between ministries and agencies to work together towards achieving the established outcomes and facilitates the unlocking and sharing of underutilized resources. And the National Blue Ocean Strategy enables rapid implementation of high-impact programs at the lowest possible cost. Now to Mr. Atama Katama from the Indigenous Peoples International Center for Policy Research. Thank you for the question posed. Currently, this aggregated data on poverty rest with respective ministries and agencies. And we have now assigned the Department of Statistics of Malaysia to collect and tabulate quality data from various agencies. And aggregated data for the civil society from the civil society organization as well as the private sector also will be checked. And all the special targeted groups, as you mentioned just now, have been the focus of our poverty eradication efforts. And under the 11th Malaysia Plan, we are continuing to give priority to these special targeted groups through various inclusive programs such as the provision of basic infrastructure, road, water, electricity, education, healthcare services, skills training, capacity building, including micro-enterprise development support, and many more. And to enhance the social protection system in Malaysia, we have formed the National Social Protection Council, chaired by the Prime Minister, and this shows a strong commitment of the government to ensure that no one is left behind. I can assure you that with the coherent and integrated efforts between the government and other stakeholders, particularly the CSOs, we will be able to address all issues pertaining to livelihood of the special targets groups in Malaysia. To Mr. Rizal Roshan from the Asia Pacific Forum on Women Law and Development and part of the Women's Major Group, thank you again for your question. And I'm happy that you have raised this issue. Malaysia has adopted a consultative approach with respect to formulating policies that affect the people. The day where the government thinks that the government knows everything is over, the Prime Minister of Malaysia has often emphasized on this. And as you will note that in the case of 2030 agenda and the SDGs, Malaysia started the process of engagement with major stakeholders even when the document was being negotiated in the UN in order to take into account their aspirations and views. We intensified and widened the process of engagement after the 2030 agenda was finalized and accepted at the United Nations in 2015. We have institutionalized the process through the National SDG Council and the Steering Committee with its working groups, which not only consults but also to serve as a platform for strategic partnership with multi-stakeholders to implement the SDGs. We have underscored that the relationship with all the stakeholders should not be limited to mere consultation. We have not only invited but have stated many times that the government alone cannot deliver the SDGs. The participation of non-state actors, particularly the NGOs and the private sector, is imperative. And as you would know, we are adopting an unprecedented scale of engagement with all sections of society, may it be the youth, old, rural and vulnerable communities, in formulating the Transformasi Nasional, or TN50, our development aspiration for the next 30 years till 2050. And this illustrates that the government of Malaysia is committed and serious in engaging all sections of society as partners in development. To the question posed by Mr. Denison Jayasuriya from the Intercontinental Network for the Promotion of the Social Solidarity Economy, poverty eradication is a success story for Malaysia. Based on the national poverty line, absolute poverty has been reduced from 49.3% in 1970 to a mere 0.6% in 2014, a remarkable achievement made in just 4 decades. The national poverty line is estimated at $2.02 per capita per day, which is above the $1.90 per capita per day as per international benchmark. As of 2014, low poverty rates were also recorded across ethnicity, gender and rural-urban strata. The incidence of hardcore poverty, which is below the food poverty line, is also low at 0.2%. And these achievements have been made possible through the implementation of nationwide multidimensional poverty eradication programs that started as early as the 1960s. As I mentioned in my presentation just now, Malaysia's efforts to eradicate poverty have always emphasized on education and skills development, income generation, employment creation, and provision of access to basic needs, as well as social safety nets. Programs by NGOs and CSOs and the private sector, for example, Amanah Ikhtiar Malaysia, Yayasan Hasanah, further complement these efforts. In addition, Malaysia's centralized National Poverty Data Bank, or EKASE, keeps detailed information about poor households for better profiling and targeting of assistance. When absolute poverty largely eradicated, Malaysia has begun to focus on relative poverty in the bottom 40 households, which comprise the bottom 40% of the nation's income distribution. And moving forward, Malaysia will continue addressing poverty in all its forms in line with the spirit of SDG 1 through 4 key strategies, which are: increase income and economic potential of the poor by providing access to quality education and skills training, as well as providing quality employment opportunities; addressing higher cost of living and income vulnerability; providing decent housing, particularly to the B40 in the urban areas; and enhancing our delivery system through improving targeting mechanism in partnering with the CSOs and the private sector. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the Minister in the Prime Minister Department of Malaysia for the presentation. And I also thank the delegation for their valuable contribution. We have completed our program of work of today. I would like to express our appreciation to the representatives of Chile and Malaysia for their presentations. The high-level political forum will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in this same room. Detailed information on the program is available on the website. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.
No,
Mr.
thanks to
President.
you,
Thank
bro.
you.